feel like people are always coming at it backwards. You'll see these screenwriting guides, and it's always these complicated charts and graphs and systems of exact beats to hit at all these exact times, which is always about this reductive copying of this formula and not listening to the needs of your story. And people desperately want their movies to be rich and complex, and they imagine these guides will help them, but that's not the way you bring something to life. Often, you want to start simple. There's no better example of this than Mad Max Fury Road, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And in singing its praises, there's so many people who write about the incredible stunt work, the production design, the pitch-perfect editing, the propulsive score, and soulful performances of the actors, but less the writing of it. And I think there's a reason for that. You could say it's that people don't really know what writing is, and that's a bit harsh. It's more that the script is really bare bones to a lot of people, even though, in actuality, it isn't. Still, if you were to describe the film in a single sentence, it would be simple. It's a 2-hour chase film where a bunch of good characters are chased by bad characters across the post-apocalyptic desert. In a way, that's it. And yet, the film doesn't end up feeling that simple, does it? And now I don't want to offer the simple, trite revelation that the devil's in the details, even though it is. It's more that I want to put it a different way. Fury Road is about the power of first using simple and clear metaphors in order to create more complex ideas in the drama itself. You're not trying to have a character to lecture you and explain a complex idea. You just start simple and you let it get complex through the action of the story. But maybe we should break that down in more detail? No? Okay, so we've done a few of these essays now, and people are always like, oh, movies have 3-act structure. Fuck that noise. It's just not helpful, and more importantly, it's not the best way to communicate how functional writing actually works, especially when you're talking about structure. It's way more helpful to look at the therefore buts of the story and break it down into as many sequences as you need, often by asking, what is the core conflict that changes between sequences? What are the mini objectives that are shifting along the way? So that's what we're going to do. And know from the start, this film is going to have 16 sequences overall, starting with teaser, a single instinct. So we begin with our title cards and we hear all these little details of the world that's been destroyed for the usual cavalcade of reasons. Nuclear fallout, wars over resources, basically generic hubris. But we don't need to pick it apart, especially right now. What's way more important to our story is this guy.
My name is Max. My world is fire and blood.
With 2 simple sentences, we know the state of his existence. He is the living embodiment of the apocalypse. But then he takes us one deeper into his psyche and his past.
Once, I was a cop, a road warrior searching for a righteous cause.
This is one of those character details that serves so many purposes, both a way of honoring past movies with the character, but more importantly, services the idea that at one point, he believed in something. He believed in order and justice and all that stuff. Though, likely he'll tell you those things are a crock of shit now. The truth is, Max was broken by his loss. He lost his family, and now he's lost in turn. A man wandering, haunted by his past, and the ghosts that can't help but linger. And please allow me to be clear. Yes, this is about trauma. Even if it's not playing it out as some long, understated drama. Yes, this chase movie is about trauma in a completely earnest way. Hold on to the metaphor. This is a man running from life. His attachments to the world still hurt him. So he never sticks his neck out for others, not anymore. And yet, he's not ready to give up on life altogether either. There's this faint glimmer of instinct inside him.
A man reduced to a single instinct. Survive.
And casually eating a lizard alive is a hell of a way to show what survival looks like. But with those few short sentences, you get an entire picture of this person's life. But unfortunately, today is not Max's day. He's immediately taken, and as an audience, our questions fly fast and furious. Who are these people? What do they want with him? We begin getting these little bits of understanding. He's tattooed with the words, O negative, universal donor. It seems they want his blood. We see them try to brand their new captured slave, but Max fights back. That's the thing. He always fights to survive. And now he's running, manic, desperate, a caged animal looking for space, and oh shit, they're high up. But he keeps risking life and limb. And it's twice now in this teaser that we make the point. The thing that utterly characterizes what Max will still have to learn. Sometimes, there's no running. Sequence 1. Welcome to the Citadel. So you've always heard people talk about world building like it's writing some history book full of lore that has to be literally explained to people. But in this film, we start on the action itself and let the details come out as we go along. We start on the back of a woman's neck. Thanks to the scene we just saw, we know the branding means she, like him, was taken and enslaved. She's walking to the truck, setting up her steering wheel with vigor and purpose. She's a woman on a mission. But for who? Enter this gross fucking dude. We literally see them covering up his disease, throwing powder to emphasize his whiteness, putting these war medals on him, shiny and proud. But then they place the same symbol, the skull with the flames, right over his crotch. Symbolically, this could not be more clear. This is a death cult centered around toxic masculinity. And we will learn that this man's name is Immortan Joe, and he is the leader of this land. A man who, with that name, sees himself as a god. And we will learn that this place is called the Citadel. Also not an accident, because a citadel is a fortress, typically on high ground, protecting or dominating a city. And dominate, they do. Today, he is sending his war boys to Gastown for resources. Immediately, the war boys do what is both a prayer and a pledge, crossed hands above their head. Immortan Joe promises them the highways of Valhalla and tells them, "I am your redeemer, rise from the ash..." Oh wait, no, I'm not saying that.
Rise from the ashes of this world!
So this is exactly what I'm talking about. You take these clear, direct symbols, and then let them add up to this radically complex idea. The notion that religion can be used in a toxic way, especially when it intersects with militaristic propaganda. Essentially, it's showcasing this idea of toxic honor, that you must do these brave things and sacrifice yourself to live forever, and then you can go to this place where no bad things will ever happen. But what's the real reason? It's just so this guy can be a rich leader who has everything that he wants. The film is already planting the seed of how this person is using systems of thought to manipulate his army. But he's also manipulating the poor people of the Citadel through resource management. High on his perch, he has all this water, and we see the green tops of the Citadel. He pours out a measly amount for the people below, barely any, just enough to keep them in servitude, praying for more of his generosity as he hoards the rest for himself. Hilariously, he cautions them about their greed, and this is a thing they need to live.
Do not, my friends, become addicted to water.
Which is some amazing bullshit if it wasn't the exact way that some leaders approach crisis and human needs. Though just a few short scenes, this sequence gives us a look at a whole fucking metaphor for the world's patriarchy and capitalistic practices. And right now that world has a mission, one which depends on their best driver, Imperator Furiosa, loyal to their cause, going off to bring them resources and glory. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Sequence 2, taking a detour. So Furiosa takes toward her destination with seeming purpose, but we linger on her quiet. We don't know what's up yet, but there's something in her silence that draws us in. Also, I want to take another second to highlight how gorgeous this movie is. The wasteland is not soggy and gray, but full of these beautiful sky blues and painted oranges. God, it's just so visually dynamic. We then cut to another character who will be critical to our story. This is Nux, and he is sickly, drained, dying, a victim of malnutrition, and a life of war in the wasteland. How do the war boys remedy this? The answer, of course, is to take another's blood. Cue him being tied up to our Mad Max. Yep, this universal donor is nothing more than a war boy's blood bag. Now, it could be a matter of debate over whether or not the blood is actually doing anything in this medical case, and whether his illnesses even require transfusion. But it doesn't seem to, and it doesn't really matter anyway, because the metaphor is what's being spelled out. It's literally taking another's blood as the only way to feel invigorated and masculine and strong. We cut back to the road and feel the tension building. Furiosa's eyes dart around. She's up to something. But what? They communicate with the flashing lights of their destination. We know where they're supposed to be going. But suddenly, She turns left into the desert. Immediately, her crew is confused, but still loyal to her leadership. It's clear that this is a driver they respect, and who has likely earned their trust before. Back at the Citadel, we see more looks into Immortan Joe's life. There's all these women at the milking station, literal wet nurses for this despot's family. We meet this dude, Immortan Joe's large adult son. Guess what his name is, by the way? Rictus or Rectus? That's right, this dude is a literal boner. I mean, look at this doofy fucker, it's perfect. And you can see the baby heads on his armor, and the way he's drinking milk. He's the perfect version of a boy who manifested into a man's man, but only in that surface level way. He's a full success of the patriarchy. We then hear, and it's implied that this is Joe's other son. His name is Corpus Colossus, but we'll come back to him. Right now, it's only important that he noticed something. Furiosa ain't going to Gastown, but instead into hostile territory. It only takes a second, but Joe knows immediately. He runs more Saunders, I guess, but either way, he goes past all this bright green, a whole world of resource just for himself. He runs to his literal vault. Again, we're very clear with the symbols here. These are the possessions he prizes above all else. What is it? Money? Jewels? The clues fly fast and furious. Our babies will not be warlords. We are not things, and who killed the world? There is a woman there, seemingly the one who helped care for those who are missing, and she tells it to Joe plainly.
She didn't take them, they begged her to go!
Also, I want to make something really clear. A lot of times when movies take aim at toxic patriarchy, it becomes very easy to talk about gender as if it's a binary. But fuck that noise. Gender is a spectrum of social constructs, and yes, I want to make that clear. The mere point here is that patriarchal Patty views it in these gross, archaic terms, and he's furious for this treasonous act. Betrayal, his prized breeders, an imperator gone rogue. So there's only one thing to do. Go to war. Back with Nux, he hears the war drums. It's time to go for glory. There's an immediate confrontation. His Lancer wants to be the one who drives. He chastises Nux for being sick, aka showing perceived weakness. But Nux refuses to give in, buying into the toxicity of his culture.
I'm not staying here dying soft!
And so, they set off to war, and our boy has a simple motivation.
I'm gonna die historic on the Fury Road.
Say what you will, the man knows what he wants. And more importantly, the audience now does know, too, as well. Also. And. Sequence 3, Convergence. Okay, so now that all of our cars are on the road, let's talk about the insane practicality of this. Just holy hell, that is so many cars. And who is this guy? This is the most metal shit I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. Anyway, as the cars rev, we see that Nux has placed his body bag in the totally safe position, and he's also overjoyed to get Immortan Joe's attention. What I love about Nux is how boyish, vulnerable, and impressionable he is. He just wants to please his daddy war general god. Anyway, shit's about to get crazy, because it seems that Immortan Joe and the War Boys aren't the only ones who are upset that Furiosa has moved into this territory. They're heading right into the clutches of an enemy gang, and they have all these cool, dangerous spikes on their car. God, I love the design choices in this film. But here's the thing, right? Why make that choice? Why introduce this other group into the story? Why not just have them fight with Joe immediately? Well, for one, you don't want to have repetitive conflict, so you want to save those clashes. 2, it fleshes out the world and gives us some bad guys to throw into the fodder of death. But it's more instructional than that, really. This is an important action setup. It's demonstrating how the rig defends itself, how all their weapons work. Also, it's establishing visual language, like how much of this film is going to use this basic left-to-right movement to establish geography, not to mention the sheer practicality of all these vehicles. I mean, this stunt work. It also establishes that this is going to be so tense and difficult for our heroes to make through. But with the rival gang dispatched, our most eager of war boys catches up to the action, and needless to say, it's dangerous to be a blood bag on the hood of a death car, specifically with a suicidal driver who is looking to go to Valhalla. But in a moment of crucial setup, this sequence demonstrates what going to Valhalla actually means. Specifically, the notion of being witnessed when it happens. We see this other dude huffing paint and going chrome.
Witness!
Now again, let's stop and unpack how important that phrasing is to toxic honor. The idea of being seen is this notion that true glory is about demonstrating your sacrifice for others in a fit of pageantry. The point of your honor being witnessed is that it further drives the culture of sacrifice. It's not about noble deeds done in secret. It's creating the awe in those who have witnessed you and inspiring them to die in a blaze of battle too. The glorification of the death march, which is something the characters now symbolically face across the board, as there is a giant dust storm in front of them. Now this is the kind of big CGI set piece that often comes in the massive third act because it feels big, but this movie doesn't use feels erroneously. It's conflict and story driven, and right now, we need to put some space between Furiosa and the bad guys, which is always her goal, right? That's the engine of the chase. They need to get away, which is why they are trying to throw whatever roadblocks they can at the people behind them. And right now, that means driving into a dust storm and hoping they can get out the other side. Meaning the immediate conflict has once again shifted. Sequence 4, Enter the Void, or whatever. So this sequence has a simple goal for everyone who has gone into the dust storm. Don't die! Too bad for these guys. But the sequence is really about 3 purposeful things for the story. The first is practical. Like I said, we need a way to put some space between Immortan Joe's gang and the war rig before the chase will heat up again. Having one side wait out a dust storm certainly makes sense for that. The second is the importance of variation. We just watched this intense car chase with all this car flipping, and now we want to have something that looks different. And that means the topsy-turvy energy of this storm with its haunting artistic imagery. And more importantly, the dust storm is a good symbol. This is some real staring at the void shit. We had Furiosa determined to see her way through, risking it all. We have Nux utterly chasing the glory of the void and certain death.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
And then he immediately begins asking Max to witness him, turning his car into a literal bomb in the process. But that's when Max's new objective kicks in. I have to stop this fuckboy from killing us. Max miraculously stops him and then they crash. But there's this amazing little part right at the end where Nux says something fortuitous.
I live, I die, I live again!
Now, we know what Nux thinks it means. It's about going to Valhalla, right? But really, George Miller is doing the sneaky thing where Nux is actually describing the changes that both of these characters are about to go through. Sequence 5, From the Ashes. So here's a reminder for all you storytellers out there. Sequences are allowed to be short. I think movies forget that fact all the time. There's this idea that scenes have to be big and fully realized to justify their inclusion. Sometimes you can just get from point A to point B really quickly. And if you let it swell, it can make it feel endless. Hell, in Transformers, it takes them 45 minutes to go to Sam Witwicky's house to get his fucking glasses. Sometimes conflict works best when you're economical about it, and more importantly, keep that conflict changing. We start with Max, once again, nearly dead. But he has survived. He rises from the ashes of the sand, such clear visual imagery. And now, he's on his own, and he finally has a chance to be free. But he has to solve his problem of being literally attached to this dude still. He tries to get the manacles off, he even tries to shoot this dude's arm off, because he does not give 2 shits. But the gun doesn't work. It seems they're attached, which means it's now the 2 people literally stuck together motif that goes through all these classic films, like Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps, The Defiant Ones, or Fled, the 1996 classic that everyone loves, so much so that my editor couldn't even find a clip of it. Anyways, point is, it's also a metaphor. Try as you might to pretend it isn't so, you are attached to your fellow man. As they say, no man is an island. And so, Max has got to drag this body around with him and figure out the way to, quote-unquote, solve his problem of attachment. Again, it's a perfect metaphor for his inner conflict. He looks off and sees that the war rig has stopped. They'll have the solution, but not in the way that he thinks. Sequence 6, Breaking Bonds, Forging New Ones. So what I love about this movie is it actually cares a lot about logic. It cares about why people are making the choices they're making, but it doesn't stop to explain things, which is really boring. So instead, it relies on visual language. Right here, we see why they stopped. They're cleaning the rig and getting all the sand out from the storm. It's simple, but a totally motivated reason for what is happening on screen. And it is what allows Max to catch up. Cause and effect. He comes around the bend and this otherworldly image literally comes into focus. He's suddenly seeing these supermodels dressed in virginal whites and cleaning themselves of the sand. I love his reaction here. The fuck? But already this scene is draped in symbolic imagery and the meaning that comes with it. Remember, their virginal white isn't a choice. It's the mark of Immortan Joe's pure view of them. He cast them with the Madonna complex, the cherished maternal possessions of his who are under his control. But this also means his sexual control. I mean, they are literally taking off their sickening chastity belts, with all the horrifying implications that go along with it. What I love about this movie is that it isn't dwelling or reveling in any of this. It's not the kind of movie that wants to rub your face in past trauma or how fucked up any of this is. And honestly, if a filmmaker has that inclination, it can sometimes speak to something equally fucked up. It's just communicating a history with these characters with visual and clear metaphorical language. And more important than their suffering is the fact that they're ridding themselves of these chains now. And because they don't know who Max is and whether he's with Joe, they even declare their motivation immediately.
We're not going back.
Thus, we begin a classic standoff. We have all these characters who want different things, right? Max just wants to cut off his shackles and get the hell out of there, because this is a guy who wants to be an island. Again, this is a trauma metaphor. And so he has to do it solo. We then have Furiosa, who's utterly suspicious and not wanting to be left to Immortan Joe's fury. So she automatically goes into protector mode. They try to negotiate while Max tries to keep his power advantage in the situation. It starts with the great visual cue where we see Max's motivation shift when he sees the water. You can feel his thirst. He has to take care of this first. And then there's so much great staging, like the way the character known as the Splendid Agarat, or however you say her name, has her pregnancy emphasized. Also, there's the way the water spills and wakes up Nux, bringing him into the scene. And then there's this amazing setup shot where it frames it so you can't see Furiosa for a split second. Immediately, it makes your brain react. You go, oh shit, he's going to want to keep his eye on her. And then there's this perfect moment of distraction where one of the wives, who seems to speak in poetics, sees that Joe's gang is coming on the horizon.
Is that just the wind, or is that a furious vexation?
She's so haunted by the thought, but right at that moment, Furiosa takes aim. Boom! The fight is so good because it's not about doing cool moves or whatever. It's about people fighting for advantage and control. And more importantly, fighting over objects that give them that control. Furiosa learns that the shotgun wasn't loaded, and it's like she's even more mad about him faking it. This is not a person to be taken advantage of. The scene uses the chain so inventively. It has fun surprises, like the gun in the skull. There's also this really big moment that comes when he fires at Splendid and grazes her leg. Eek! And then in the fight's final moment, Nux and Max seemingly have a common objective here and essentially work together to reload the gun and get control. Common objective achieved! But the second that happens, the conflict reorganizes. They hear the drums in the distance. Immortan Joe is on his way. Aw, look how happy Nux is. But right now, he's still deluded and obviously thinks his blood bag is going to want the glory too. But here's how Max feels about that. As for the wives and their objective, we learn that they're trying to go to the green place of the many mothers, whatever that is. Max could care less. Again, he's still in island mode. And now that he has his chains off, he's going to go off on his own with the war rig, and he doesn't give a shit about them. So he leaves them to die. But turns out Furiosa had a safeguard, a kill switch.
This rig goes nowhere without me.
And she's the only one who knows the code.
So we wait.
This happens because Max has no reason to trust either of them. She literally just tried to put a shotgun to his face. So Furiosa has to take a new tact and convey just how much Joe will not look kindly on his actions.
You're relying on the gratitude of a very bad man.
Especially as he's damaged one of his wives. But finally she gets to the thing that Max still cares most selfishly about.
You want that thing off your face?
Again, the freedom instinct is everything to him. Also, I love that she gets one last kick in on her chastity belt, which happens to be a handy metaphor for Sequence 7, the death of the old self. I don't want to be reductive, but I feel like most movies don't really understand how to make a compelling character arc. It's because they make these lazy choices. It's like they organize around these simplistic, singular traits, like I was afraid and then I learned to be brave, or some other one-note change. The problem is these sorts of approaches lead to so much delay. Instead, What is far more compelling is the kind of change that comes with a character taking action, but making crucial mistakes. And so we begin a sequence that aims at achieving that for several of our characters. Max is now in the cab with everyone, and you can see him still panicked, scared, unsure, and again driven by that one instinct. How do I survive this? He's looking for danger and finding it in just so many guns! But also, this is a neat little setup of establishing all the weapons that they're going to be using for the rest of the film. If only there were a metaphor for this, perhaps like written by a Russian author or something. A Chekhov's gun, if you will. Anyway, more importantly is that Max's understanding of the larger situation starts to take shape. They're all playing games of conjecture about his dark motives, and also the reality of the danger of Immortan Joe is beginning to set in with him.
Of all the legs you had to shoot, that one was attached to his favorite.
It's not that these words change him, but it's planting the seeds of understanding for the change that will come later. Seeds of understanding. It's kind of a neat phrase, huh? Especially when you're talking about setups and character changes, as if we're all just waiting to be blossomed into plants. Well, here's a funny thing. We see Nux run and hide and get back into the war rig, but guess what Nux means in Latin? It means nut. Okay, no, I mean nut more like a kind of seed. Okay, fine, but stick with the metaphor. It's the sense that one is capable of learning and growth and change. And meanwhile, the scene also begins setting the new stakes of danger and conflict. 1, they're heading to a rocky place. Another metaphor! And 2, Immortan Joe has also rallied the allied cities to come after them, including the Gastown boys. And then their leader, the People Eater himself, who sans knows is implied suffering from the rot of syphilis. By the way, this sort of detail could imply that the movie has some kind of ableist streak or equates sickness with badness, but that's so not a part of the complete metaphorical picture. The point here is that this character doesn't care about whether or not his toxic disease is hurting others. I wonder if that applies to life in any way. And 3, we also see that the bullet farmers are coming too. Man, a real axis of evil over here with the gas, firearms, and war industry. Hooray. As these dangers stack, there's a quick exchange in the rig. Max goes to fix the gas attachment ball thingy, I don't know what to call this, but he does it because he doesn't trust anyone else to do it, which in turn gives us a quick second to see that Furiosa still has a weapon that he doesn't know about it. Let's call it Chekhov's knife. But as Max has gone out and finally gets his mask off, boom, it gives Nux a chance to sneak in. But Nux's attack, if you can even call it that, doesn't go the way he thought. He's quickly overwhelmed by these women, and they get the advantage. And a whole argument begins to spill out about what to do with him. Some want him dead because he's a threat. Some take pity.
He's just a kid at the end of his half-life.
And oof, that metaphor hits hard. But more importantly, he's suddenly being hit with the truth of what he didn't know. Nux probably imagined that these wives were happy to be with Immortan Joe, because he's the god, the kind of man who honored him just by looking at him. And now he finds out that they hate him, that he's a lying old man. Nux is essentially being challenged with the truth of the war boys and what they have done in destroying the world around them.
We're not to blame!
Then who killed the world?
The answer? The patriarchal war, firearm, and gas industries, of course. But Nux is not ready to accept any of this, so he's thrown out as dead weight. You may ask, why have this sequence? Why don't you just have him go back to Joe earlier in the scene? Well, it's because we have to plant the necessary seeds of doubt, and we have to show that change is hard, especially now that Nux has this white cloth to try and use and gain favor with Immortan Joe. Now, he can finally get closer to everything his old self ever wanted. And he'll learn what that really means. Sequence 8. Safe passage. So we enter the rocky place in a rocky way. It seems Furiosa has made a deal. The little back wagon thing ball with the gas? Yeah, she's exchanging that for safe passage. But she doesn't know if this deal is still good. And because she was supposed to be alone, she needs the wives to hide, and she also needs Max to be ready to start the rig in case something happens. This creates a really important character moment. 1, she needs to trust him to start the car, so she tells him the starting sequence. And 2, it gives us a beat.
What do I call you?
Does it matter?
Now, it may seem like an innocuous little thing, but it shows the power differential. Furiosa is ready to trust him when she needs to, but Max, he still has his walls up. And more importantly, he doesn't want to matter to someone. Thus, we begin an incredibly tense standoff with these biker dudes who rule the canyon. You'll notice it also emphasizes this weird narrow rock archway, which is so visually striking. You can even see the top of the rig brush against it, so you think, that's narrow. You don't realize it at the time, but they're doing Chekhov's archway. The deal starts and things are not good. Furiosa tries to play it straight and calm as possible, but she's actually not lived up to her part of the deal.
You said a few vehicles in pursuit, maybe.
And instead, there's 3 war parties following them. She knows this is bad, but she keeps just trying to push through the deal. You can see so much of the tension in the way she plays with her eyes. God, Charlize is a good actress. But just when the tension is at a fever pitch, boom, they're already here. There's no time for a deal, and the bikers go off in pursuit. Fortuitously, they create an explosion with more rubble that allows them to stop the 3 war parties. But luckily, they have a monster truck, which is the one vehicle that can now give chase, and Immortan Joe is gonna go himself. I love this beat because you really get some important character moments here. Like the bullet farmers, they have this disdain for all this family squabble. But there's also this really important beat with Nux, where he gets to go with them on the monster truck. This is his big chance. Valhalla awaits. Meanwhile, the motorbikes are chasing the war rig, and holy shit, this is one of the best edited action sequences ever. Seriously, if you're a budding editor or filmmaker, please study this one again and again. It's not just the insane stunt work and the motorcycle jumping, but the execution. Note the way the eye lines always set up the next shot. Notice you can always see what they're looking at. Notice the way the arms follow the movements and they shoot people out of the air. Everything feels in motion, but there's real weight and impact to the moments. There isn't a cut that bumps you the wrong way at all. And the music is just so propulsive and exciting. But there's great character work and action too. Where last seen they were fighting each other, Max and Furiosa are now going back and forth, handling each other's guns, reloading, working as a team. I'm so proud of my children. Now this sequence doesn't so much end as it does change, because as soon as the tanker goes and blows up, the motorcycle guys have lost what they wanted, and the conflict changes focus to General War Daddy wants his property back. Yeah. Sequence 9, family squabble. So what I love about this part of the sequence is how character-driven it is. Right from the start, Immortan Joe has a good shot at Furiosa, but his wife Splendid protects her. But what does Joe seem to care about most in this interaction? He obviously cares about his precious wives, right?
That's my child! My property!
That's right. The biggest concern for him is his unborn baby, which means, yes, this movie is going to extend its look at patriarchal politics of reproductive rights and abortion. No, it's not going to do this directly because her character isn't trying to get an abortion. It's more about the toxicity behind policing and owning women's bodies that go along with these issues. Now the battle begins. One of Joe's loyal war boys takes a bullet for him, and Joe, he doesn't even care. It couldn't be more clear. These people are just fodder for him. The bodies he throws at things to help him get what he wants, which couldn't be a more perfect setup for the speech that's about to come in everything that he tells Nux.
I myself will carry you to the gates of Valhalla.
We know how much this is bullshit at this point, but what I really want to highlight is Nux's face here. And Nicholas Holt's incredible performance in this film. He captures this boyish wonder, fear, terror, and awe of someone so desperate to please their distant father figure. It really is such a huge part of why this film works so well, and I so appreciate it. Now, Nux goes on his Valhalla run, and what happens? His chains get caught and his not Chekhov's gun goes flying. Iconic. It's not just that it's one of the funniest fucking lines I've ever heard. This is also a metaphor. Because what is it that stopped Nux? His chains. And remember what I said earlier when we were talking about the Defiant ones? These aren't limits. These are the ties that bind us to humanity. And it represents the part of him that actually wants to remain connected to people. It's brilliant because it's this pitch-perfect use of the extended metaphor. In this movie, it introduces so many symbols and ideas, and now we just have to see their meanings play out in visual language in action itself. We then get the most terrifying climactic back and forth. Max gets his hand pinned, Splendid heroically puts herself in harm's way yet again, but it's a life that gets so cut short. George Miller is so good at keeping us off balance. Right when you think it's safe, she slips on the blood from where he shot her. She falls. And Joe can't kill his unborn son, so he flips the car. Again, the extended metaphors say so much here. It's this little bit of careless shooting from Max that came back to cost her life after she tried to save him. It's something Max may not even fully realize. But it's this thing for us, the audience, to internalize for sure. The group is hit so hard and wants to go back for her. These are people who don't leave others behind. But Max has to help make the call. I want to state that this is actually a radically complex moment. There's nothing simple here at all. Is she even alive? Is there something to go back to? This is honestly a real test. It all happens so fast, even for the audience. So he has to make a choice of what to say. And since survival matters most, and going back is certain death, he says what he needs to believe.
She went under the wheels.
And so, they press on. Sequence 10. In want of forgiveness. So I often talk about how much I dislike it when movies use death for some shocking emotion or effect, and then everything just moves along like nothing ever happened. But here, everyone has their moments to sit with it. For Morton Joe, he holds up his wife and screams in agony. Meanwhile, his son only knows the emotion of wrath and fires his gun into the air. He can only react to violence on them with violence outward. The reaction back in the war rig is more complex. Sorrow, devastation, quiet. But perhaps the most interesting reaction is from one of his wives, Cheeto the Fragile, who instantly wants to go back to Joe. He'll forgive us, I know. Oh wait, I'm not saying that.
He'll forgive us! I know he will!
Again, this is one of those things where you can be like, really, she's named Fragile? Haha, that's on the nose. But you have to remember, this was a name that was given to her by a Morton Joe. It's what she's been told she is by her abuser. The implications of that reframe everything. And it's not that she craves that life again, it's that she doesn't want to end up dead herself. It's the fear of death, and it sends her regressing into this broken life versus no life at all. The scene also allows for a huge reset moment. They survived this ordeal together, and now Max seems curious for the first time. He asks about the green place, which is just a long night's ride running east. This is also important because it clarifies our next objective and a timeline of expectation for the audience. It also properly sets expectations with the inventory check. They match every gun with the bullets, and it turns out there's 4 Chekhov's bullets in the rifle and 29 in a little old pinky there. People take time and space to reflect on the death in their own ways. Furiosa begins doing repairs under the rig, always trying to be helpful and practical. And then the red-haired wife, who is aptly named Capable, she goes and takes watch. But there, she finds Nux, a war boy in a state of being a war pup. There he is, hiding, curled up in a fetal state, feelings of shame and just paralyzing him.
He saw it all. My own blood bag driving the rig that killed her.
He too wants forgiveness for this, but mostly because he feels so weak. The worst thing a young man can feel. So he lashes out and begins doing the only thing he was ever taught to do. Hit. But that means hitting himself. But then she tells him to stop hurting himself. Please understand, for the first time ever in his life, someone is telling him, don't hit. It touches him. But see, he can't process that. She must not understand what's really going on with him. He failed at achieving his destiny 3 times when the gates of Valhalla opened. But then she counters with something so counter to everything he's ever believed.
I'd say it was your manifest destiny not to.
Nux has been having to deal with the notion of death from the nuclear fallout for so long now. He begins talking about Larry and Barry, part of what's chewing on his windpipe. And oof, this is so sad, especially the way he has to personify them in this kid-like way with little smiley faces. It could not be more clear. This is a traumatized boy. A boy who was taught the only way out of that traumatized feeling was to go to war. The only way not to be scared was to fight for heroic honor. There are no magic words she can say. But for the first time, someone just stays with him while he's scared. He doesn't realize it, but it's the only kind of forgiveness he really needs. And look, I get that there's probably some cynical, reductive way to view this scene, like, man, bad, woman, good. That's a really reductive way to look at the complexity of what's happening here. It's not about bad or good. It's using a dialogue that unpacks the toxic psychology of patriarchy in a real metaphorical way. These are the first real moments where he's mourning the death of the old self. And it's not an accident that right as it's happening, there's another conversation in the front of the rig. And it's them talking about how Splendid used to say that guns were called anti-seed because you plant one and you watch something die. But here, we establish the opposite, with Nux, our precious seed who simply needs to bloom. I get it, sex puns. Sequence 11, Long Night's Journey into Day. In action films, the quiet moments are important. I know some filmmakers think you can just fill it all with noise, just this endless whiz-bang distraction. I mean, to be fair, that goes in both directions. I like a lot of quiet, understated films, but I've seen a few that think if you just fill space with contemplative silence, that this will somehow communicate brilliant thoughts, and yeah, point is it's neither. In order to properly enthrall people, you have to mix it up and create juxtaposition. The reason the last half of Jaws feels so unrelenting is because it has this constant ebb and flow that keeps you on edge. Without it, it's just the endless noise. So I really love the way they handle the pace of this night sequence. It starts with them getting stuck in the mud, but it shows how smart the team can be immediately. They get to work, change tires, and thinking quick, immediately set up traps to get Immortan Joe's crew all stuck in the mud the same way. It's so important to drama to have these kinds of moments where you see the capability of your heroes before you see their failure, even if it's in those same sequences. Of course, Joe's crew does get stuck. Boom! And it's another moment where you see the lethargic gas town dude get mad at how much gas and vehicles they lost. He seems like the most economically driven fat cat of the three, which makes sense considering he's basically disgusting Monopoly man. But the scene takes another turn when this quote-unquote doctor is checking in on Splendid and her progress with the baby. This guy tells Joe that Splendid is on death's door, but again, Joe only cares about the child. And without a beat, Joe chooses the baby's life over any attempt to try and revive his wife. It's all the hypocrisy laid bare. Sure, he calls her Splendid, and Angarad means most loved one, and yet he doesn't actually love her. In the end, she's just a vehicle for his children, his own way of being immortal ever on, and he would throw her life away in a second in that pursuit. Then the quote-unquote doctor does quote-unquote surgery so callously, and the baby is no more. Of course, Immortan Joe only has one question.
Was it a male?
He was. A healthy male baby, the perfect ideal of everything he wants in his perpetual rebirth and immortality. Rictus chants along with his father's agony. It's such an utter look at the terrifying nature of this patriarchal dogshit. But the sequence ends with a promise from the loyal bullet farmer.
Now you stay here with your grief, Daddy. I'll fetch him for you. Be careful!
Because, like the monster truck last time, he's got a car with treads and he can go over the mud. God, every design choice in this movie, it just ends up having cause and effect. I love it. Even the issue of getting stuck in the mud has returned for the war rig, but this time, someone is in pursuit of them. They gotta think quick and handle the situation together, but thanks to the lovely conversation we established before, now Nux wants to help them. He knows the rig and he can help out, which means attaching the cinch to that little thingy over there. Now, it might seem fast that Nux and Capable are already like this cute little couple, but this is the wasteland, man. Days are short. Grab those happy moments when you can. But it's not so much the logic. It's more that we genuinely believe it after that tender scene we just saw. Remember, if you justify it before, it's not quick, it's economical. As that's all happening, we have the bullet farmer firing wildly at them, and they gotta try and snipe from a distance. Ever-confident Max, our island, gives it a go, but he ends up missing a few times. There's only one shot left, and he's either gotta trust himself or trust Furiosa with the rifle. He makes the smart decision and even gives her a steady shoulder. In another fit of delightful metaphor, the light has shattered and blinds the bullet farmer. He's not ready for the truth. He quickly puts on a blindfold for his destroyed eyes and starts firing guns akimbo. This is such a pitch-perfect symbol for the woman holding the scales of justice. And we know this is Miller's intention because he says, "I am the scales of justice!" Now, it would be easy, once again, to be like, oh, that's too on the nose. But again, the power of it comes in the extended metaphor, not the reference. Because this character is the representation of gun violence. He claims to be justice, but all that means is he's firing blindly in all directions. There's no justice, nor judgment here. It's just wanton destruction. The utter embodiment of the reckless, uncaring, destructive nature of guns in and of themselves. And for our heroes, it makes the danger more pressing than ever. But there's no more rifle bullets, so what can they do? Well, it's time for a massive character moment. Max loads up on some weapons and tells them he's gonna go take care of it while they get the war rig ready. Max? Volunteering to help? Furiosa doesn't seem to trust what's really happening here, and so she asks,
What if you're not back by the time the engines are cooled?
Well, you keep moving.
And again, I have to pause and highlight that this is not some simple moment. In one way, he's completely making a sacrifice for their benefit. And at the same time, he's doing it in this very Max way, where he's just trying to take care of business and be an island. In a weird way, him wanting them to move on is kind of a reflection of what he'd do in their place. And props to Charlize for the way she plays that complicated reaction. She's so unsure how to feel about this gesture, but she's definitely realizing there's more complication in Max than she thought. As they prep the rig, Max soon returns in the most badass way possible. I sort of hate the way that we use the word badass, but what else can you say about his casual, bloody return with a bag and more ammo and even a steering wheel? The choice not to show what he did isn't just economical, but is playing into the power of mysteriousness. Whatever he had to do, it must have been the most gnarly and grisly thing. But because they play it this way, we see it through the power of everyone else's reaction instead of the actual depiction. This movie, for all its gusto, shows how much more power there can be in what's left unsaid. Now with the bullet farmer dispatched, they can finally press on into the rest of the desert in the peace of night. But as they do, we see crows fly and all these dudes on stilt and wait, who are these dudes? What are their lives? In one way, this is a beautiful kind of world building. We don't stop to explain any of this. It's just this little invitation of your curiosity into the world beyond. But much more importantly, it's secretly a story setup for what comes next. Sequence 12, Homecoming. Max wakes with a start. Still too much of the cornered animal built into his DNA. But he now knows there's nothing to fear here. As they're approaching their destination, Max is actually stopping to ask questions about how she knows this place even exists. Now, there's all sorts of storytelling theories about when you set up pertinent information. Sometimes you want to drop it earlier so that the big moment comes as a surprise. But here, not only does it help to have the information be fresh right before the scene, it's actually really important for this stage in their relationship once they've built this kind of mutual respect. Because really, it's about her confiding in him. So this is where it makes the most sense. Furiosa tells how she was born in this green place, but she was stolen as a child, her mother killed. These details have been teased in bits and pieces before, sure, but here it's a way of being vulnerable with Max.
They're looking for hope.
What about you?
And of course, Max gets right to her motivation.
Redemption.
Again, this is one of those things where they're being direct and to the point, but there's so much more space in the imagining what this means. Furiosa has become this trusted imperator in Joe's army. She literally had to hold up the patriarchy. There must have been so many unspeakable things she had to do in that pursuit, but the specifics of that trauma aren't important. What is important is that everything she's doing now is about trying to atone. It's the reason she's coming home. They arrive at a destination. A woman naked atop a tower beckons for help, but Max knows a trap when he sees one.
That's bait.
Furiosa exits the war rig and shouts about her history and her name, which in turn brings out the rest of the women from her old clan. Meet the Volvani. I mean, yeah, it's a playful word for who they are, but it's effective shorthand when you're trying to paint a portrait of an antithetical society to the patriarchy. What's interesting is that you see their suspicion of Max and Nux immediately.
The men. Who are they?
They're reliable. They helped us get here.
And then there's this lovely little reunion and meeting. They get such a big kick out of the wives and their soft skin. The warm feelings go in all directions, but then it turns quickly.
I can't wait for them to see it.
See?
And that's when she finds out that the green place is gone. It was actually the poison bogs with the crows they passed the night before. Just another beautiful place corrupted by the decay and the death of this horrible wasteland. Everything she ran from, everything she fought for, everything she dreamt of returning to is gone. She can only scream into the wind, believing it was all for nothing. But as often in the nothing, you find what you really need. Sequence 13, The Last Seeds of Hope. Now at a loss, all our heroes stare into the sky and muse about the world just before things crashed. What was it like in a world where everything wasn't full of death and utterly hopeless? They see a satellite fall and talk about how everyone in the old world used to have a show. And oh my god, are they talking about YouTube? But as we get all these scenes of togetherness and see that Nux and Capable are snuggling in harmony, there's one beat that the story really zooms in on. One of the older members of the Volvani is talking to one of the wives, who is actually known as the Dag. And they're talking about her pregnancy and the idea of bringing another war boy into the world. The older member of the Volvani says, hey, it could be a girl. But rather than even contemplate that possibility, The DAG asks her about her gun and why she brags about her ability to make headshots.
Thought somehow you girls were above all that.
The DAG is actually trying to make a point here. Why does this woman, bragging about her violence, think she's better than a war boy? Now, this is where the film has the most remarkable answer. The Volvani immediately goes for her bag. It's full of seeds, heirlooms, little trinkets of the old world.
Back then, there was no need to snap anybody.
This implies so much. There's no relishing for her in the war of these worlds. She's not confusing the pride of self-defense and self-value with the corrupting forces of warmongering. She's not like a Morton Joe and the boys. She just has the simple recognition that it doesn't have to be that way. She knows it can be so much better. And this is the most important wedging point of this portrayal. I honestly understand concerns people have of how the Volvani might skew a bit far into the notions of the sacred feminine and all those reductive ideas that go along with the gender binary. But I think this scene is making it clear that this isn't a matriarchy, nor some mythical land where everything is perfect. Nor is it trying to have them regurgitate feminist ideals verbatim. So much of it lies in their age and hardness. The point is that they're survivors who have been through the bullshit of this patriarchal world. In her bag of things, the trinkets of a life that represent a world that used to have satellites and a time when everyone had a show. Things that represent the entire range of people and emotions and personality and love and acceptance. And in a world that's become a wasteland, these are the leftovers of Pandora's opened box, the last seeds of hope. And it turns out, it's an important metaphor for the conversation that is to follow. Furiosa comes to Max and tells him the plan. They're going to take their chances with all the gas, load up the more fuel-efficient bikes, and have enough for 160 days to try and cross the salt of the endless desert before them. And more importantly, she tells him that one of those bikes is his. But Max can't do that. He tells them that he'll make his own way because he still can't have that kind of connection. It's too vulnerable. And because of that, he can't help but give some advice against what she's doing.
If you can't fix what's broken, you'll go insane.
The statement is so powerful because it taps into so many meanings. Remember what's broken to Max. It's his loss. There's no way to bring back the dead. Of course, everything would be hopeless for him, because he has not tried to rebuild anything he can lose. But this statement is a double-edged sword, because you have to remember that word. If you can't fix what's broken. If. Because the next morning as he watches them go off, he's hit with a memory of his daughter. She asks him, "Where are you? You promised to help us," and literally shoves the seed of an idea in his head. Because this is when he realizes a mistake in what he said. There is a way to fix what's broken. He charges over and tells them outright.
This is your way home.
The Citadel. After all, it's the place where the green is. It's the place where water and life is, the very thing they've been chasing. And right now, it is undefended. They just have to go back through the canyon, turn everyone around, and block the pass. All the details of the plan come into place. Even Nux will help get them through at the end.
Feels like hope.
And that's the real thing. The lesson Max needed to learn finally hit him. There's some things you can't run from, especially not alone. And if they face it together, they can find redemption. Sequence 14, in through the outdoor. This guy's crow's feet. I love that this fat cat war party was just like sitting around, moving slow, like getting shade. Now they're getting caught so unaware. Again, extended metaphors, yay. But too bad for them, it's time for the mother of all chase sequences. Now, notice the use of geography in the sequence. We spent all movie going left to right. Now we're finally coming from the right. And there's so many little details I could go over at the start of this, and the way it just builds so beautifully. There's the way the DAG is praying to anyone who will listen. There's the insane nitro boosting sequence, and Max is being mad that they have his old car. And then there's the rad fucking motorcycle moves of the Volvani on the bikes. But after only the briefest moments of success, things immediately turn for the worse. Two Volvani have a brush with death, but just like with Splendid, the safety is short-lived, and they are taken out just after. The dread seeps in. This isn't going to be a victory lap. This is going to be harrowing. The bad guys begin harpooning the war rig, slowing it down like a whale. But Max is using the bolt cutters. Yes, the same instrument he used so many times to try and free himself. Now he's using it to free the rig and the rest of them along with it. Again, another of the endless series of little visual details and reversals that show character growth in this film. Bad guys close in from all directions, including literally with these guys now swinging on the poles. It may just seem like a neat visual idea, but it radically changes the feeling of the action. Instead of just worrying about the X and Y axis of depth and sideways movement, now you have the Z axis of north and south. Again, danger from all directions. Like, holy shit, they grab and noose Furiosa, and right away, oh no, our favorite old Volvani, she got stabbed. No, this is bad. Oh god, she's slowly dying. It's chaos. But we get this quiet, sad moment of her reaching for her things. Even now, she holds on to the seeds of hope. Everything's going wrong and feels terrifying. Zoe Kravitz gets stolen and lifted out. Max almost gets hit in the head with an arrow, but his hand flies up. The same response to the ghost daughter that's been happening the entire movie. A payoff that is part of the reminder that he's still alive. And once again, his loss talks to him. It's not saying run away, but stay with me. Which means stay alive and stay with them. And suddenly, things snap back into focus. That arrow's still in his head. Everything goes haywire. Max and Furiosa save each other, but they keep holding on. Literally, as Max falls off the side, Furiosa gets stabbed by the weird baby guy? I don't know. And they keep fighting and fighting as the bad guys are closing in. They keep losing. God, will there be any relief? Suddenly, Nux fixes the engine, and they get that little bit of wiggle room, allowing them to crush Max's old car, the embodiment, the death of the old self, and finally letting go. And holy shit, the stunt where Nux kicks Max onto the other car, oh my god. Now Max gets control of the other rig and uses the People Eater as a human shield. Morton Joe never gave a fuck about this guy, so of course he shoots him. But these moments of victory are so brief. It's constantly stacking the odds and throwing more danger at them. Max sees Furiosa literally dying, so he rushes back and wait, was that Chekhov's heavy lead foot? But upon landing, he's immediately snatched back up. My god, the danger and loss is relentless. We see the canyon archway, established earlier as our destination. Everything in this movie is a Chekhov's gun. Hint, that's just what good writing does. Everything converges and narrows, and they wrestle for position in the narrowing canyon. But Immortan Joe gets the lead on the war rig. But our ailing Furiosa has a plan.
I'm gonna need you to drive.
I love how hurt she's playing this. She's literally dying and struggling through it. There's no indulgence here, no badassery, and the vulnerability only highlights her heroism. Meanwhile, Max is behind them, and god, the sequence is just so good at establishing geography. And oh no, the Doofoyer! Wait, did he just use his flame guitar against them? Again, this movie is so metal! They're being hit from all sides, trying to keep the plate spinning. Rictus, the large adult son, comes over. Max takes on Rictus. Furiosa takes on Joe's best bodyguard. Nux drives and tries to help them, but Furiosa almost fucking falls off. Now Max is in trouble, but somehow gets back. But oh no, Immortan Joe pulls out the gun. This is it for...
Remember me?
Jeezy Pete's! Now here's the thing about that line. Once again, this movie is being really direct in a certain way, and yet it's alluding to a deeper history and meaning. We don't know what exactly happened here. The movie never said, but we know all of Joe's horribleness and every terrible thing he is capable of. So it's not hard to imagine a host of possibilities. But the bigger point is we don't have to show them. The movie is so disinterested in these kinds of specifics of trauma because Furiosa's current moment is what matters. It's her wants, her motivation, her life, her power, and her redemption that are so much fucking more important. What only matters now is that he's dead. Is this really what's happening? Nux can barely believe it. But now's the chance for them to get into the lead car. The Dag symbolically takes the last seeds of hope from the oldest Volvani, smiling as she's already passed on. And Nux tells Capable he's gonna jam the entrance and then follow her. They share looks. He better mean what he says. The canyon arch is coming, but oh no, it's Rictus and he's still alive. He comes for Capable, but Nux won't let him get to her, and he slams on the brakes. Enraged, Rictus pulls the engine, time slows. The flames of Valhalla grow bright, but now, the idea of sacrifice means something so much more important. Nux looks to Capable, the one person who ever showed him kindness, and points to her. I'm not crying, you're crying. No, actually, all jokes aside, I'm crying. I cry at that moment every time because it affects me. And because that's the point. Vulnerability is what gives real strength, true strength, the kind of strength that stems from compassion and love. And there's one character not done learning that lesson. Sequence 15, A Man with a Name. The sadness of Nuck's sacrifice hangs over the group, but they're losing one more. Furiosa has a collapsing lung, utterly dying before them. But for once, it is Max, the loner and survivalist, turned into a medic before our eyes. He springs to help. He even gives his first words of apology in the entire film.
I am so sorry.
He helps her breathe, shows her tenderness and care, but she's still dying. So he goes one further and instantly begins giving her his blood. He's now what he swore he would never be at the beginning of the film, a willing blood bag for someone else. And then he says the one thing he refused to before.
Max. My name is Max.
Because it does matter. His name matters because he can matter to someone. And after all this, she matters to him too. Sequence 16, full circle. And so we return to the heart of society, the Citadel. And as they pull up, Max is hit with a command that has pointed wording.
Reveal yourself!
And that's what he does. He reveals his selfhood. He is a man, a warrior like them, but he is going to show them what is true. The point of this is to upend society. Joe isn't a god immortal. He's a horrible old dead man who is now on the ground. A horrible man who, like most dictators, preyed on fear and then gets eaten alive by those he lorded over. And with the patriarch devoured, Furiosa and the women emerge. And we pause on these figures as they essentially contemplate what to do with their society. There's this really powerful moment, specifically with Immortan Joe's other son, who is the one who seems to be left in charge. Now, he's a character we don't know much about, but we all have a framework to understand him. We can imagine what it was like growing up with Immortan Joe as a father. Growing up in that ableist, terrible society that worshipped being perfect in every way, that took pride in sons who looked like Rictus or Rectus. You can imagine what was in his father's mind when he gave him that name, Corpus Colossus. We can see that pain on Corpus's face, the tearing of loyalty inside, and the feelings of paralysis over what to do. I'll be honest, ableism is something I'm still trying to get better at talking about and unlearning all the crap we've grown up with. It's one of those things where you see the degree to which it's just seeped into so much culture in this really toxic way. And when it comes to this film, people have written the most incredible personal essays about how they were touched by the treatment of Furiosa's arm, which is to say, the matter-of-fact way it was shown to be a non-issue. There's no talk of it being a source of trauma. She simply uses a prosthetic the way so many people do every day. There's so much power in showing the normalcy and capability of such things. So I honestly don't know if this film is perfect and says all the right things in all the right ways, nor is it for me to say. But I do feel the movie is sensitive to those ideas and moments, and that it cares for this character too in this moment, as he feels this weight of toxic patriarchy coming off his shoulders too. But the decision to bring them up actually belongs to three little war pups who ran up to the controls. After all, they are the future. Those who embody the sensitive young generation who cares and wants to make a better world, which can always start right at this second. Next, they let the water go, sharing the resources people desperately need, not hoarding out of the fear that they won't have enough for themselves. Society can simply do better. And as our characters rise up, bringing as many people as they can with them, which is something everyone deserves, Max thinks for a moment. This is his chance to be a part of a society. And as the waters rain down, Furiosa turns back and looks. Max is on the ground leaving. They share a look of understanding and appreciation. But our road warrior has to return to the wasteland as they deservingly rise. The final image could not be more clear and powerful, but Miller then makes a decision to end on a quote. "Where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves?" I remember Googling this after I first saw the film, but it's actually a made-up quote from the implied history of the world within these films. Sure, if you're inclined, you could play into the games of conjecture about the lore, but as always with Fury Road, the purpose is metaphorical. Because what George Miller is really giving you here is a prism with which to look at the entire film. The notion of a wasteland has been at the center of so many metaphors throughout history, but most people think of the poem The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. But here, the idea is that a wasteland is always a personal one. It's about what happens when we feel like we lack purpose, security, and connections, and feel awash in a sea of desperation. It's the space of the hopeless and dire life. And in that space, what we fight for and who we fight for tell us so much of who we really are. In his wasteland, Immortan Joe used toxicity to build a horrific empire. He's a perfect embodiment of what T.S. Eliot called the hollow men in his poem, which characterized these stuffed men as these fat cats who get rich off the suffering of the world and lead it to ruin. He also wrote Cats! But the beauty of this extended metaphor is that it goes in all directions. Because Joe built a wasteland for Nux, a boy born, dying, and sick, ever desperate to find some kind of relief. But he was only taught the most toxic ways of doing so, including death in service of the hollow man who rules him. But in his failure, he finds salvation. In weakness, he finds strength. The understanding that true release doesn't come in death, but simply letting the toxic versions of your old self die long before. And that's where you can live on eternally. Not in glory, but in the love and kindness you left for others. In her wasteland, Furiosa started in a place of green and care and innocence, but was stolen. And she had to make do in the service of a cruel world with moral choices that didn't sit right with her. So now she wanted to find the kind of redemption in acts that save others. And in that refusing to give up, in that utmost bravery, she helped change the world itself. And lastly, there's Max, the namesake of our film. I see so many people talk about how Fury Road is not really his story, but as is always the case with our road warrior, that's the point. Max is the archetype of the reluctant, wandering hero, which feels right at home in the modern age because heroism isn't a singular change. It's part of an everlasting cycle. Something we have to keep remembering, that we're not only islands. And time after time after time, we have to remember that we can help. That's Max's journey. He finds his growth and soul again. Besides, sometimes the best way to be a male figure in a horrifying patriarchy is for it not to be your story, but simply to help others as they go through theirs. Because in the end, that's who Max really is. He's not a war boy. He's the universal donor. It's a beautiful thought. I look back at all of this and I realize I've spoken for 13,000 words about the meanings and import of everything in this film. And there's still so much I didn't get to. Because honestly, Mad Max Fury Road is as rich and complex a film as we have. Not bad for a 2-hour chase movie. Thank you everybody so much for watching, and I just want to single out and especially thank all our Patreon supporters. You have no idea how much you are responsible for these things happening at all. So really thank you, and specific thank you, just throwing out a few names here. We have Andrew Stephen Robles, Clementine Webb, Kevin Awakuni, Lawrence Walker, Alex Garcia, Ash, Awesome Theo, and Theo is awesome. Hi Theo. Bookish Delight. What a lovely little name there. And Brad Higginbotham and Bridget Gong. And let's see who else we got around here. We have Daniel Palumbo Tejera and Alanda Sani and Fun Problems. Ooh, fun problems are better than bad problems. Jonah Ko. Hi, Jonah. And more coffee, please. I would like coffee, and Nobu and Ray Estrada. There's so many people here. And TK422, that's a Star Wars reference, everybody. Yay. You know Star Wars? It's that thing that everybody likes, you know?